Apologies. No apologies have been received. Any members got any further apologies? No. None yet. Draft minutes.
Gordon Dunn's on the Decal committee at present, I think. So.
Oh, right. Are they having some
or a meeting
special or whatever? Okay. Agenda item number 2 then is draft minutes. The draft minutes of the meeting held the 20th of January are from pages 5 onwards. So, members content with the detail and accuracy of the minutes? Yep.
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Chairperson's business. The Airport Commission report. This is at page 12. Right. I was asked by a guy who works for Heathrow Airport to meet them, or to meet him, and so he came over and met me in the constituency office there Friday week ago. So subsequent to that, he sent over this submission, and this is basically the stuff between should it be Heathrow or should it be Gatwick. Now, really what we've got there is the breakdown as they see them on page 15 of what they refer to as the total economic benefits outside London, all those sorts of things. So I really am in a position, other than in this here as anyone else would be, to establish just what the merits or demerits. Otherwise we're taking it for granted that these facts are correct, although they say it's the Airport Commission has provided them to us. So unless members want to commission further research, I think the submission has to be in with the Airport Commission by February the 3rd, if we're going to make one, or if members regard it as relevant to make one. So I'm in your hands.
Stay out of it, Patsy. I think we should stay out of it. I think we know enough about either side of the argument to start looking into it at this stage.
I'm not in a position that's what it to come to a considered conclusion one way or the other than the stuff that's in front of me here. Stephen?
Yeah, I think, Chair, I mean, saying our Courts Commission, to some extent they echo what the Deputy Chair is. Maybe it's my ignorance, I'm not entirely sure what the Airports Commission is, but when it's branded Heathrow making every journey better, I don't feel it's an independent...
No, sorry, this is done on behalf of Heathrow,
yeah.
But the facts that they say they're using are presented by the Airports Commission, which is the authority which will determine one way or the other whether the expansion go ahead at Heathrow or go ahead at Gatwick. So members are happy enough. I'm prepared to say note it and let the process run its course.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. NIRIG annual conference at page 16 is an invitation from Northern Ireland Renewables Industry Group to its 5th annual conference. Now, they've come a wee bit late with their invites, so I can't attend it myself. So unless anyone else is available to attend. Anybody else available? Phil, Deputy Chair?
I'll look round blankly here, Patsy.
Right, okay. Okay, noted. If anybody does wish to attend, maybe they would inform committee staff. Okay. Northern Ireland Science Festival Fame Lab competition. That's at page 18. It's on Wednesday, the 25th. The black box again. I'm double booked and I can't get to it myself. So if anybody else wish to attend, the invite, I'm sure, would extend to other members. Anybody wishing to attend, maybe would inform again the committee staff. Thank you. Agenda item number 4 is an oral briefing from B9 Energy, the County Down offshore wind farm. Papers for this item include an update from DETI regarding the cancelled first flight wind offshore wind farm project off the coast of County Down. That's at page 20. And table 2 is written briefing from B9 Energy in regard to first flight wind project, and tabled as well are written briefings from Tidal Ventures regarding the proposed Fairhead Tidal Energy Park. Just to inform members, since providing the written briefing to the committee, DP Energy has emailed to inform the committee office that NIE has informed the company that there's almost no capacity now available at Ballycastle, and as a result DP Energy will be forwarding an updated written briefing in due course due to the substantial differences this will make in its evidence. So, just to inform members, with us today is Mr. Michael Harper, the Director of B9 Energy. You're very welcome indeed, Mr. Harper, and thanks very much for attending to be with us here today. So, essentially, we've heard all the stuff that's been in the news, so it would be helpful to us as a committee at this side to hear what have been the problems, if you like, so that any difficulties that might have been encountered by either yourselves or others in the industry, what we can do in terms of the devolved institutions here, that those potentially can be rectified. So that'll be very helpful for us. In other words, looking ahead to possibly learn if lessons can be learned from what has happened, and see essentially if there are solutions that we can recommend to the department and oversee the department about those. So thanks very much for attending. The nature of the committee is, I'm sure you've been informed, is that it's open to yourself. You have the floor for 5-10 minutes max, and then we open it to members for a Q&A session. Okay, so thank you. Please continue.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. So my name is Michael Harper. In addition to being Managing Director of Benin Energy Offshore Developments, I was a Director of First Flight Wind Limited, which was the consortium which is now dissolved, developing the offshore project. I was responsible for stakeholder engagement, communications, regulatory policy and public affairs. I started working in wind energy in 1988 and in offshore renewables in 2002. We were invited to present to the committee on the project, and I've submitted a note, and with your permission, if I can just introduce that note as a brief statement. So on the 2nd of December, the consortium comprising ourselves, Renewable Energy Systems Limited and Dong Energy, which is a Danish wind energy company that formed the consortium, announced that it would be ceasing further development of the project off the coast of County Down. The decision to cease is, in my opinion, very disappointing, and it's disappointing for all involved. As the IPCC's 2014 fifth assessment report has made explicit, human influence on climate change is clear and growing, with impacts observed on all continents, and if left unchecked, climate change will increase the likelihood of severe, pervasive and irreversible impacts for people and ecosystems. And not only could the project have made a substantial contribution to Northern Ireland's requirements for secure and low energy, low carbon electricity, but it could have also provided significant local economic opportunities and facilitated investment in local infrastructure development. So in order to understand the rationale for ending the project, I'll just say what I think it was not the result of, just to clear up some misconceptions which appeared in the media following the announcement. It was not the result of any concern over the suitability or prospects for the area for an offshore project, and all consortium members believed that there continues to be potential in the future for an offshore project in the area. It was not as a result of any lack of funding for development work, as though there was the possibility of changes in the composition of the consortium, a plan had been put in place to fund further activity. It was not primarily as a result of the financial terms of the future contract for differences arrangements, as suggested in the media following the announcement. Though this was an issue under discussion, we were confident that that particular element could be resolved. And it was not as a result of the transition phase between the renewable obligation certificate system and the contract for differences system, as suggested by some, as clearly the project, as that transition would be well over by the time the project was being commissioned. As the note I circulated makes clear, the central issue affecting the decision to terminate related to the design of the new market for renewable energy for Northern Ireland, which is being rolled out across the whole UK, the so-called Electricity Market Reform, EMR for short, and the preparations for its introduction. So if I were to summarise the thought process that led to the decision, it would be that following lengthy discussions between ourselves, the Department of Energy and Climate Change in Westminster and DETI here, we did not consider that continued development was justified, given both the likely criteria that the project would have to meet to be eligible to compete for contract, and the consortium's perception of the prospects of DEC introducing flexibility into such criteria that we considered was necessary. I'd like to emphasize that we felt the flexibility we were proposing was not a one-off special treatment for a project, but reasonable and legitimate measures necessary to ensure a project connecting in Northern Ireland, an offshore project connecting in Northern Ireland, could compete on a level playing field with GB competitors. In other words, we no longer had confidence that future arrangements would allow us to compete on a level playing field. Thank you.
And that was the sole issue. You went through a range of things it wasn't.
Well, as I mentioned, we did have issues relating to the structure of the contract for differences and the extent to which they would level out the pricing differences that existed between GB and Northern Ireland. We were actually quite confident that the arguments were robust and that DEC would be persuaded by those arguments in the structure of when they were coming to modify the Northern Ireland contracts for differences. What we did not have confidence, which was the issue which was the key issue for us, was over flexibility on the timescale and the criteria for eligibility. We were required to be fully commissioned by March 2021, and at the original start date of the project in October 2012, we were able to do that, but it was very close. It was very tight. It was a challenging timescale, but we felt we were able to do that. As the project progressed, progress was not being made on the development of the detailed design of the EMR for Northern Ireland, and indeed for the UK, but our concern was relating to Northern Ireland. And in June 2014, as my note pointed out, there was a further one-year delay to the working out of the detailed design of the contracts for differences for Northern Ireland as a result of the need to redesign the SEM across the island. And it was felt it was not possible to work on the contracts for differences for Northern Ireland until the high-level design of the SEM had been established. Now, that one-year delay meant that our timetable for delivery for the programme was now not possible.
By a year.
And given that this was a peculiar situation for Northern Ireland, it didn't affect anybody else in the UK, we felt it was reasonable to introduce flexibility on meeting that deadline of March 21, as this was not in our control. And in fact, going back to the very beginning, our project was starting 3 years later than any other comparable project in the UK because of the timing of the tender process in Northern Ireland compared to the tender process in the rest of the UK. And so we felt it was reasonable and legitimate that Northern Ireland projects had some degree of flexibility, and in terms of the timescale, and the discussions we had gave us it was made clear to us that that was unlikely to be possible to achieve.
That's what I was going to ask. So you were made aware that simply there wasn't going to be any flexibility. Is that the case around the time?
Well, we had the discussions with the department here and in Westminster, joint discussions, and it was made clear to us that it was unlikely that DEC in Westminster would facilitate that level of flexibility.
Okay.
Now, it was never ultimately tested because the modification process is going to take place this year. But given two things, given the fact that DEC had been explicit that they thought it was unlikely they would be able to be flexible, and given that we didn't feel there was enough push collectively from Northern Ireland for it, that we did not feel it was justified continuing the considerable costs, with the likely outcome of finding that with further development we would still not be eligible to actually even compete for a contract.
Okay, when you say there wasn't enough push from Northern Ireland for it, push by whom or by which department?
Well, there was very clearly a high-level political commitment to the development of the offshore resource, and that can be seen in all the work that was undertaken under the Strategic Environmental Assessment starting in 2008 and concluding at the beginning of 2011, at the end of 2011, and the development of the Strategic Action Plan to accompany the development of the offshore resource, and in terms of the ministerial commitment to introduce the EMR into Northern Ireland with on a basis that allowed for level playing field competition.
Sorry about that, you can just ignore that. We don't have to evacuate the building or anything.
So there was, as it were, executive and high-level ministerial objective of introducing the EMR in a way which meant that the project could compete with GB equivalents. But when it came to the rolling out of that policy in terms of discussions with DEC, we didn't feel that there was sufficient vim, energy in trying to persuade DEC that this was a critical project for Northern Ireland and that flexibility was needed. We got the impression, two things that were clear, that DETI in a way did not feel it was their role to be, I'll use the word lobbying, but and that's not the word that was used, but lobbying on behalf of a single commercial project. And secondly, that they felt essentially the hands were tied and that these were matters for DEC, and that it was regrettable, but their hands were tied.
Okay, right. Okay, thanks very much for that. I have Mr. Agnew, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Michael, for the presentation. Can you say how much investment was made by First Flight Wind, if it's commercially sensitive? Then
it's not particularly sensitive. We've not published it before. No one's really asked us before. It was around 8 million.
Okay. And how much would you anticipate investment for the overall project had it reached completion?
Well, we're only a part way through development stage. We would need to do considerable more before we were in a state to actually submit an application. And a project of this size would probably take some 20 million or so to get to a point where it's possible to submit an application for consent. So then obviously you would need to take the project through the final detailed engineering design phases, and that is a very expensive exercise post-consent. And then obviously you need to construct the project, and a project of this size is maybe £1.5 billion. So
Significant.
significant.
And in terms of megawatts, I know there was some changes from the original plan.
Well, originally we were targeting 600 megawatts, but following stakeholder engagement and a review of the constraints across the zone, we considered, and of the constraints that involved both environmental and other users and grid connection capability, we ended up targeting a capacity between 300 to 400 megawatts. Now, given that an offshore turbine generates something like in a year 30 to 40% more than an equivalent turbine onshore, because of the consistency of the wind, that would have generated around about 13.5% or so of Northern Ireland's electricity.
Okay, but the department argued that it couldn't lobby, as you put it, on behalf of a commercial company.
That's how it was put to us. Yes.
How much ministerial involvement, how much contact did you have with the minister, and are you aware how much, if any, contact the minister had with DEC?
Well, we had meetings and correspondence, and we know the minister had correspondence with the ministers in Westminster. So I mean, I can send a note on the frequency, but it was we were not. We did not feel at any point that there was access was a problem and communication was a problem in that regard. We also, of course, had meetings with the Permanent Secretary, both the former Secretary and the new Permanent Secretary, and the civil servants, his colleagues. So we never felt that there was an issue of access. And in terms of the correspondence between the ministers in Northern Ireland and Westminster, from our perspective, they said the right things, and we were happy that the policy was to achieve a level playing field, but it's the implementation that I think was where it lacked sufficient commitment.
So, I mean, you said there was a lack of vim and vigour. What would that have looked like? What would you have liked to have seen from the department or the minister?
Well, no, it's not. I mean, how these meetings take place is you have a lot of meetings with a lot of different parts within DEC, a lot of different civil servants. So it's before you get to there's many tiers of individuals with their own speciality of parts of the EMR. There was a steering committee looking at the Northern Ireland CFD modification process, and you ask what I would have liked to have seen. We would have liked to have seen action which would have given us confidence to believe that it was worth progressing with the project, because we would have had confidence that the case that we were making would have been fully supported by DETI in presentation to DEC. We got the impression that almost DETI were saying, well, we've got to align ourselves with the other civil servants, rather than saying we've got to align ourselves with Northern Ireland towards DEC. And I personally actually believe that if DETI had been more energetic, then we may have persuaded DEC of that case, but that was never tested. I mean, the consortium as a consortium decided that there was too much of a risk in pursuing that, given the experience we'd had to date. So when I say more energetic, what do I mean? I mean clearly enunciating the merits of the project to DEC. The reasons why the flexibility that we're seeking for was legitimate, and making the case for it with us. We attended the meetings together, but we needed to feel them
It almost sounds like you were up against two sets of civil servants rather than.
But it was a triangle, in a way, yeah.
Yeah. And just final question, Chair. I mean, you were meeting with civil servants. At no point were you sitting with our minister and with the DEC minister?
No.
Sorry, that didn't happen. So this was potentially the biggest single investment in Northern Ireland, and no point was there a kind of ministerial to ministerial discussion that you were involved in? Or
That we were involved in, no.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Given, Paul.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Michael, for your presentation. The clear impression I get is that the Department of Westminster didn't want to countenance any change.
Yeah.
In terms of the ministerial input from DEC, was there any?
Well, there was correspondence between the Minister and DETI,
Okay.
which confirmed the intent to introduce EMR into Northern Ireland in a way which meant that there would be level playing field competition.
Okay.
So there was that input, but at the levels of civil servants that we met at DEC, there were a number of there was no
How
ministerial level meetings.
How far up the civil service chain of command in DEC was the engagement?
Well, I mentioned that there was a steering committee set up for looking at the modifications in Northern Ireland. Originally, it was supposed to be set up some time ago. It was actually ultimately only set up in the autumn of 2014. And that was the vehicle for tabling all the issues, addressing the issues. And it was the civil servants involved in that, and we'd obviously corresponded with their supervisors who were responsible for the introduction of EMR in the UK. I think one of the issues was that DEC actually was so focused on trying to get it right in GB first, and there were a lot of loose ends to tie up. And Northern Ireland was stepping into the process later than the rest of the UK, and so they'd put it on one side effectively. They said, well, we'll deal with you later. And so there wasn't really attention given to it before the rollout in GB had taken place. And so the issues that we were trying to table were really not taken up by DEC until they dealt with the issues in GB.
Is the project completely dead in the water, or what needs to happen now to give any prospect of the project coming back?
Well, the consortium is dissolved, so but the concept of a project is not dead in the water, in my view, in the sense that the area still has great prospects for a project. But it seems to me that even to this day, we do not know what the structure of the contracts for differences for Northern Ireland will be. And that's a process that will probably take for the rest of this year to unwind. And given the delay that will create, no project would be able to meet the criteria for the first framework. And so you'd be looking at a project being delivered post 21 into the second framework, and nobody has any idea what that framework will look like. The DEC has said that the details of that may be published in 2017, 2018. So to avoid the same problem, until people know what the market is going to be, it's very difficult to bring people, give people the confidence to develop what is inevitably going to be an expensive exercise.
And finally, Michael, in terms of the managing of the conflict that DETI seemed to be then presenting as to why they couldn't go in and make a very firm pitch, would be seen as backing a commercial enterprise. How do you think that could have been managed to overcome that particular issue? Because obviously there will be those in the media, and there'll be other politicians who'll be very quick to accuse politicians aligning with big business and pursuing their particular agenda, and that they need to remove themselves from that. And then when they do remove themselves from that, then they're accused of not actually fighting for green energy in this case. So how could that be managed?
Well, I think 2 points I'd make. The issues we were raising, I mean, we were unfortunate. We were a single project. So the case we were putting forward appeared as though we were special pleading for a single project. If there had been 5 projects, the arguments would have been exactly the same, and you would have been arguing on behalf of the sector rather than a single project. It's a small place. There is room for one project, and we were unfortunate that we were, as it were, tarred as if it was a single case. The second thing is, we do know that other jurisdictions don't take quite the same approach, and they would not hold back from being much more direct with DEC over what their projects in their jurisdiction needed.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you. And excuse, I have a health statement that I need to respond to, so
All right, fair enough, Paul. Mr. Frew, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. You talk about the, let me paint the picture and see if I've got it right. You're basically proposing this, you've been awarded this
That's right.
contract, if you like, with the Crown Estates and everything else involved, which I'm sure was a very complicated process even to that point. You then find yourself in a perfect storm whereby there's massive flux and change happening both in GB and in the end of Ireland with regards to the single electricity market. So you have things changing with regards to the electricity market reform and the contract for differences, and then you have the creation of what will be named ICEM. Explain to me though, Michael, how you have to compete, because that's one of the reasons for not going forward, is the fact you think that it's an unfair competition now, and not a level playing field with GB, whenever you will be effectively tapping into what is a single electricity market on the island of Ireland.
Yes, well, the contract for differences arrangement will be would involve us competing for a contract against all projects in the UK. Right,
okay.
So what I mean by the contract, whilst we would have a contract to sell the electricity within the ICM through the pool arrangements here, the support mechanism is we're moving into a competition for support, and we would be competing against other offshore projects in the UK, and so it is very, very important that we're competing on a level playing field with them. The support effectively comes through a single UK pot, the levy control framework, and there will be a single competition, which is currently still banded by less established technologies and more established technologies, but it's a single UK-wide competition.
How will it ever be? How would it ever have been a level playing field when you are in the single energy market, which is different from GB?
Well, yes, no, that's absolutely right. Well, I mean, DEC recognise that, and that is why they're going through a process of modifying the contracts in Northern Ireland to accommodate the changes that the ISCM create. And that's true for all renewable energy projects in Northern Ireland. They have to have a slightly different contract to the rest of the UK to address that, and that's recognised. So DEC know there have to be differences to accommodate it. We were saying that in addition to that, there are peculiarities relating to offshore connection. Some of those relate to the differences on the policy and the regime for connecting an offshore project. So to do with grid connection policy, in GB there is something called an Offshore arrangement, which has the effect of reducing the price to the generator for the connection arrangement. And we would have to compete against that. But we were confident that that could have been addressed. And there were ministerial statements on both sides to say they'll look at that carefully, and we were confident that could be addressed. But the other issue is the timing issue. Northern Ireland's project and the two tidal projects came in 3 years after the previous round in GB, and so they had 3 years head start to meet the same deadline that we were. And that caused a problem, and the additional year delay this summer caused, with the high-level design of the ICM, meant that we were simply not going to be able to be eligible well, we were not going to be able to meet that criteria and therefore not be eligible.
Do you see, when you talk about a feasible project and potential for the future, you're obviously talking about post contract for differences being settled and also then the ICM being established and settled?
Yes, okay, the ICM is supposed to come in 2017 or so. This project was looking to commission in the end of 2021. So really very, and it could have been later, depending on how the timescale of the EMR detailed design worked. But it was certainly well beyond the ICM, and it was well beyond the introduction of CFDs into Northern Ireland. In fact, it was so far beyond the introduction of CFDs into Northern Ireland, it was actually in the second framework, which was, we were very clear we could not continue to develop if we were targeting the second framework, because there's no information available on what that will look like.
Basically looking into the dark, basically?
Into the dark, and the way things are is it's too much money, too much risk.
Obviously, it was a massive project. It was originally for 600 megawatts, which is basically a power station.
Yeah.
The equivalent of a power station, and that was reduced, obviously, when you get into consultations with people and things get reduced, and we can understand why that has been brought down. Was there ever any worries or suspicions around grid capacity for your project?
No. We'd done 2 comprehensive detailed studies with Sony, NIE, their consultants, looking at feasibility of connection for the project. And the reference capacity of 340 megawatts could have been connected without the need for any deeper reinforcement on the network because of the locations at which it was proposed to connect. A very strong point on the grid, transmission network level voltage, close to high demand areas, Belfast. So it was, we were very pleased with the grid connection arrangements. It's probably the only wind farm in Northern Ireland that could be connected without the need for reinforcement. However, having said that, it goes without saying that the north-south interconnector needed to be in place before we could connect, because, given the timescales that we were connecting on, we were reasonably confident that the north-south interconnector could be in place by that time.
Can you give us more detail on the actual, the name of the substation?
Oh, Castlereagh.
Castlereagh.
Yeah.
Going straight into Castlereagh.
Yeah.
And did NIE give you any sort of available capacity of that?
Well, it's Sony because it's at transmission level. Well, that's not the way we do it, I suppose. I mean, we could have accommodated, we could have introduced more there, but then there would have been other changes involved as well. And so the way we did it was given the other constraints and what we were optimizing from a project's point of view, we asked them to consider in the second phase of the study whether 340 megawatts was connectable. And there were a number of options for connecting it, but in our mind, which were all secure, but in our mind, Castlereagh offered the best opportunity.
What was that part of your thinking? I know you talked about consultation between all stakeholders.
Excuse me, Paul. Somebody's mobile is obviously very close to a microphone, and it's impacting upon the sound quality here. If they would just anybody move their devices back a wee bit, please. Okay. Sorry, Paul.
Are
Please.
you okay?
continue.
Was that part of the feasibility studies, whether to go for a 600 megawatt or 340 megawatt? Would Castlereagh would they have accommodated? Would that have accommodated the 600?
Originally, Castlereagh did indicate they would have accommodated 600 megawatts, but we had to take everything into context, and there were other reasons why we were being constrained on the capacity side, and those were more to do with the area rather than the grid connection option. So I think if we could have gone back and more could have been accommodated, but at some point there would have been the need for a minor reinforcement between Lisbon and some other point on the system, and I can provide details if you want, when we went beyond the 340, but it was not a significant reinforcement.
I know that the last question. I know that at the time it was announced around the Crown Estates that the 3 projects was announced at that time. Obviously, yours was the big one. I don't know if this would be commercially sensitive or not, but do you now fear for the other 2 projects, the tidal and the?
Well, they're very different. I mean, firstly, the timescales relative to GB projects is not quite the same. Okay. So there was a separate tidal round in Scotland before the Northern Ireland round, but not 3 years before. So the competition isn't quite the same. Secondly, there is a they're targeting, I think, development by 2017 for a smaller capacity, or they were until I overheard what you were saying this morning, which meant that they were effectively targeting the ROC regime, 10 megawatts, I think, within the ROC regime. If for the larger amount, competing within the CFD arrangements, I don't know if for the arrangements for tidal, DEC will still consider them to be, at the time they want to commission that larger capacity, less developed technologies, and therefore will treat them in a different way. But I suspect that offshore wind would, if it develops in the way that the market looks like it's developing, there'd be much more pressure on it to change its status. It may not happen in the next framework, but it will at some point. So I think that there may be some sort of separation between offshore wind and tidal, whereas at the moment they're classed both as less developed technologies, and that may affect the different arrangements that apply to them. So I'm not close enough to know to comment further on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Mr. Dunn, Gordon.
Thanks, Chairman, and thanks very much, Michael, for your presentation. You mentioned about the cost to date. Just confirm again what the cost has been to date.
Well, it was
expenditure.
Slightly more than 8 million.
8 million?
Yeah.
8 million, sorry, I just didn't hear you properly. Right, give us an idea of the overall cost of the project, please.
Well, well, I said earlier that the cost to submit a planning application would be somewhere over 20 million.
20 million?
Yeah. And after that, there would be a detailed engineering design work before you start construction. That would be quite a lot more. But I'll leave that because there's a big range there. But the overall construction of a project of this size would be around about 1.5 billion.
1.5 billion? Mm-hmm. Okay. Major project then. The price of crude oil is a major factor, obviously, in the cost of energy.
Yes.
You know, is that a factor perhaps in the overall assessment of how cost effective this project would have been and the risk that potential investors would have? Perhaps that's a major factor in this.
No, it wouldn't apply under the contract for difference arrangements. because what that does, and this is a good attribute of the new system, is that it establishes a fixed price. And so to the generator, they receive a fixed price, whatever the market price does. And that means they're able to go to the market to raise money with a long-term fixed price. Because as the market price adjusts, the government is effectively providing the support mechanism which compensates the generator up to the fixed price. Now, it has an impact on policy, because if the market price goes down dramatically, the amount of support in order to achieve that fixed price that the government pays goes up. Conversely, if the market price goes up, then the amount of support needed goes down, to the extent that if the market price exceeds the fixed price, then the generator ends up paying back to the government money, because they're receiving more than is needed.
Is it true, though, to say there is a lot of uncertainty out there in relation to the renewable energy market?
Well, there's always been uncertainty. I mean, essentially, it's still a very new and growing industry, and it is competing against a declining industry, or declining sectors, which are very keen to preserve their market share. So I think it's difficult for every single sector in the energy business. There's no sector which thinks it's not difficult.
It's ever changing.
Is it? And it always will be. I see no, but that's not a reason in itself. I mean, the electricity sector is familiar with those risks and understands them. I think it can manage, though, to agree those risks. They do vary with government policy and government direction. And things, when government sets targets, that's a very important signal, and that's very helpful to industry. When they set policies in place and action plans in place, that's very encouraging, and that's helpful, and industry does need that.
So the feasibility of the project, has that changed in recent years?
So I missed
the long-term feasibility, has that changed?
I don't think it has. I think there's nothing we've seen of the project itself in terms of the feasibility of developing an offshore project in that area connecting to the Northern Ireland system, which would suggest to me that it's not feasible, and we think the prospects are very good for a project like that in that area. But we have to get the market right. We have to get the arrangements so that a generator, a developer, knows what the market is going to be with sufficient confidence to be able to proceed with the development. We knew we would have to compete for a contract. We understood that. We were not trying to avoid the competition. We did not feel, though, that competition was going to give us a fair crack of the whip. So there was no justification for us proceeding. That was the issue.
You know, a sceptic would say it just doesn't stack up. It's too expensive, your project, so you've had to back away.
I'd disagree.
Okay. In your paper, you talk about roles and responsibilities. You said it was clear that there was consistent ministerial support for the development of the offshore renewable resource around Northern Ireland.
Yes.
So, as Minister Foster, you're happy that she was
Yes, since the start of the SEA in the end of 2008, the strategic environmental assessment work, I mean, that whole work and then flowed into the offshore strategic action plan that the Minister took to the executive and was endorsed, was very comprehensive, very well done. I think better than anywhere else in the UK, in fact. It certainly formed a good basis for the tender that resulted in the offshore wind project and the two tidal projects.
So where's the fall down there? And was, you talk, sorry, the impression was given that there were decisions for DEC that there was little they could do to influence the outcome. Just clarify.
Yes.
Who do you see as they?
Well, in that situation, it was the civil servants within DETI.
Within DETI, in Northern Ireland, obviously, here. Yeah.
But, I mean, the decision-making process was largely in DEC's hands.
Yeah, yeah.
What we were looking for was DETI really to be standing behind us and saying to DEC, we really need this project, and we agree that these the flexibility that's being sought is reasonable and is needed, and you've got to do it. That's what we wanted the DETI to do.
Apologies, I missed the start of your presentation. What have you done then, or what did you do to try and highlight this issue back up to the Minister, who you have admitted was supportive?
We had regular meetings with the Permanent Secretary.
Sorry?
With the Permanent Secretary.
Right.
We did meet with the Minister as well, but that was sort of in the middle of the process. We were very comfortable with the policy that was put in place, and as it were, the minister to minister engagement, and there was a commitment to introduce the EMI in a way which could lead to level playing field competition. That there's always going to be a question of what one person thinks is level is not necessarily what another person thinks is level, and so there's room for the two departments to have a legitimate debate. But we did not feel that in those debates we were getting enough full backing that to say that Northern Ireland needs this, and these proposed flexibility suggestions are necessary.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Just picking up on a theme that we were expanding there. If, and we're into the realms of hypothesis here, but if in future it did, by some intervention or some collaborative venture on behalf of the two governments, the devolved government and the Westminster government here, sufficient clarity or security of future did manifest itself, and I see the issue of the EMR, it's probably not just yourselves that this affects, it affects other companies as well. So therefore, any argument that a government department could potentially be a lobbyist for one single company, I'm parking that, I'm setting that to the side, particularly whenever there's significant investment of this scale and whenever it would apply equally to others potentially. If that clarity did manifest itself to give potential security to you as a company and to your investors, equally importantly, in the future, could this project be back on track again?
Not through First Flight Wind, which has now dissolved.
Right,
but there are, I mean, it's a very active market. There are many developers, and the tender was very competitive. There were a number of people competing for the tender originally, and there are new entrants to the market since then. So a lot of the projects are done through consortium, with a number of companies coming together and sharing the development work and the construction work and the costs of it. So it's not unusual for partners to come and go within consortia. So, but the particular one that was formed for this project has now dissolved. So it's not available to start again, as it were. And I return to the point I made previously, that we will now not meet the March 21 deadline, and so we are in a different framework again. And then there needs to be clarity on that framework before the new framework.
And that's 2017-18, you thought, before?
Well, Dec said, well, we're not doing, I mean, in the discussions, Dec would have said, well, we're not doing it before the next election, obviously, because
Well,
anything can happen.
Okay.
Chair, can I-
Sorry, just, and I want to bring Danny in, but Paul, very brief.
Just a
clarity on
very
this one
simple,
here.
blunt question. If this project had have went ahead, what would have done, or in your opinion, what would have done to the cost and the impact on electricity bills for both domestic and industrial?
Well, it makes no difference in that sense because this, the levy control framework, we sell our electricity in, you know, as it is to the SEM,
Yes.
and you receive a fixed price.
But it
The,
would
the
affect
support
system
mechanism.
marginal price, though, wouldn't it?
In certain ways, yes, but only to the extent that any new wind displaces more expensive fossil plant. So it's not this project which is peculiar there. The support mechanism that comes through the levy control framework is a UK support mechanism, and Northern Ireland consumers will be paying the same amount whether this project goes ahead or not.
Yeah.
So by not going ahead, you can't argue that it's reducing the bills if people thought that, you know, they'd have to pay to support it, because effectively the same amount of capacity will now be developed somewhere else in the UK, and the support provided by Northern Ireland consumers will not reduce as a consequence of this.
Okay, thank you.
you.
Brief, Stephen,
Yeah.
because I want to come to Danny here.
It was just on the back, you mentioned that First Flight had dissolved as a consortium. Where does this leave B9 Energy?
Well, B9 Energy Offshore Developments has itself wound up its activities, and we've closed our office.
Thank you. Mr. Kinahan, Danny?
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for not being here for your presentation, and I hope I've picked up enough to make my question work. But you need a level playing field and we need flexibility. But what mechanism is missing here to make it all work? Should there be an advisory group? Should there be something that is pulling the civil servants together? What is missing that we're not doing to put it in place next time?
Well, actually, I can't remember where. I think I did express this at effectively the day after the tender, that there should have been a steering committee to look at this issue. Now, there was a steering committee formed for the consenting side that DOE and DETI, by virtue of its Article 39 responsibilities, formed to address the development and the consenting, and that was very successful and worked well. I thought there should have been one to address the EMR issues as it related to this project, which could have been for the three offshore projects together. I don't think it would have been appropriate to have made it suitable for all projects in Northern Ireland, because it would have been too many issues. But focused on the offshore connection issues would have been very appropriate. It would have been DETI, DEC, possibly the regulator. Wouldn't have needed DOE in that regard, but that would have been that would have focused people's minds on the issues and kept it as an issue. I mean, it was in our meetings with DETI, it was always the issue. From the beginning, this is the issue.
Thank you. Is there something we should be doing that is linking us to the rest of the UK in a similar manner? Is there another mechanism that's needed there so that we're pulling, so you're not trying to work on different dates and different levels?
Well, I mean, the decision for Northern Ireland to step in to the rest of the GB a year later, at the time, was taken, and we didn't really have a problem with that at the time, because we were commissioning way after its introduction. It affected us because it meant that DEC weren't turning their attention to work out the details for Northern Ireland until they'd sorted out GB, and then it did begin to affect us. I don't know. I mean, there are pros and cons of doing it in tandem with GB. The advantage is you can see their mistakes and correct them. You have the potential to do something slightly different, slightly more focused on Northern Ireland. So I think I wouldn't criticise that particular initiative, that policy decision. Yeah, so in fact, in many ways, it's still, that problem balance is a better way to do it, to keep the two separate, because inevitably Northern Ireland is different. We're in a different market. We're in the Irish SEM market. We're not in the mainland market.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that, Danny. Mr. Harper, thanks very much indeed. That concludes our session with you. That has been very useful indeed and very informational. So thank you for giving of your time to be with us here today. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
I think that raised quite a number of issues, and we are due to have the Minister before us on the 10th of February. It might be helpful, I know Jim, you were taking notes there, issues that popped up, if we could add that to the agenda for our meeting with the Minister on the 10th of February. Okay.
Chair, I don't know, is it within this committee's competence or whatever, is it would it be appropriate for us to write to DEC? Is that something we can do as a committee, write to DEC, basically expressing our concern and disappointment that they didn't?
I think maybe before we do that, it'd be helpful as well if we get copies of all correspondence that there has been around this particular issue and related matters between the department and DEC, or even the utility regulator, if there's any other correspondence with the regulator on these matters.
Yeah.
Members happy enough we get that?
Agreed.
Okay. And then, based on the information that we have there, Stephen, we could, I'm not ruling out what you're suggesting, but if we're in a better informed position to do that, you know.
Of course, sure.
Is that not going to be a huge amount of paperwork?
It might or it might not.
Okay.
Depending on what.
Well, I think it would be very useful, Chair, because this will have the contract for differences for Northern Ireland will have a massive impact on renewable energy, whether we like it or not, or whether it's right or not. So I think we as a committee would be up to speed and educate on the whole aspect, because we are moving from ROCs. We all know ROCs is pretty simple. Contract for differences is pretty simple also, but it's just it's a different system entirely. Chair, I don't know if you're going to come on to the title, the Fairhead title project or not. With regards to
if you want to raise that because of the issue that has now popped up this morning here.
This is no surprise to me, because I don't know whether it was this project or the other one beside it, but I was always told that one would have to connect into Kells, which straddles the whole of my constituency, and basically illustrates the issue we have with grid. Now, with everything, there's a balance here, because it takes money to invest in the grid, and that money and that investment ultimately comes down to the rate, the bill payer. So there has to be a balanced approach here, because we just can't invest millions and millions of pounds in all parts and arts of the grid. It just wouldn't be feasible, and it would basically knock out business and domestic users. But what I would like to know is our current capacity as it stands today. What you see there from the NIE is a very detailed capacity, available capacity for Fairhead Tidal Energy Generation Project. There's no reason why either NIE or Sony, and again with this convoluted system I'm not exactly sure who's responsible, but surely they should be able to give us that basic information on every single substation. There we have for Ballycastle, we have 0.4 megawatt capacity for export and 1.7 for import. And that's pretty easy to read. Now, why can't we ask for a table like that for every single substation on that? Now, I know we've probably done a bit of work on this around our reviews, but that would be interesting. It will change. That'll be a fluid thing, as with applications going in and so forth. But that would be very interesting to know, because while Castlereagh, which is probably Castlereagh is probably one of the biggest stations in Northern Ireland, if not the biggest outside of a power station. That has capacity for a 600 megawatt with add-ons, but it most certainly can take the 340 megawatt. I would be interested to know what Kel's sitting at capacity at the minute, what Sharkin is, what Ballycastle is, and so on, Korean, so on.
Right.
Sure.
Well, first, our members agreed that we get detailed breakdowns from NIE of the capacity
Yeah,
that's available there.
Great.
Yeah, Stephen?
Sure, I spoke to a representative of the company yesterday after the email come through. I raised the same point with them. My understanding was it was to go through KELS anyway. The issue here was for a 10 megawatt pilot to test the technology before they went ahead with the full 100 megawatts. My understanding was, or certainly what they told me, was that NIE had told them the capacity for that would be available at Ballycastle. And it's only now they're hearing, after, again, years in process, oh no, it's not after.
But that shouldn't come as any surprise, because if you can imagine if domestic applicants for wind turbines have been applying into a system, then capacity would be getting reduced anyway. So
Well, that's what I'd like. Can we write to NIE and ask, was a guarantee given?
Yes.
Or was it just a case of at
What
this
is
particular
available
time?
now? Yeah.
And has that situation changed in the meantime? Or was the company given misinformation?
Well, often what you get is there's they put a health warning in a lot of these.
Yeah.
to
Well,
say,
if we can get
this,
clarity
yes,
for
yeah.
what information the company was given. The other thing was in the NIE letter provided to the company, there's talk of a non-standard solution. And if we could ask NIE, could they provide more information about what that means?
Okay.
Is it something that, is it non-standard for Northern Ireland? Does it happen in GB? Because we've heard that before. You know, it's not, they won't do it, but GB does it.
Yes.
You know, just if we could get more details on what that non-standard
Okay,
solution
will
is
do.
and why it can't be deployed.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much for that. I know I found that very useful, that briefing from Mr. Harper there. Okay, can we move then to the next item on the agenda, which is the insolvency bill. We have the committee stage summary here. That's from page 22 onwards.
Excuse, Chair, to see our friends with the Mary's bill.
Card good order, Archie.
All right.
Okay, all the best. Right. We have clause by clause table from page 22 onwards. We have also correspondence from the Royal Courts of Justice in regard to the Insolvency Amendment Bill, page 53, and tabled is also a response from the Chancery and Probate Committee to the committee's correspondence. It also contains suggestions in relation to a number of clauses, and these can be dealt with as the committee considers the clauses. We have suggested actions in the clause by clause table, and so it's an opportunity for ourselves as a committee just go through these here. We've dealt with a lot of this in a lot of detail, so a lot of detail.
You're right.
So there weren't really that many issues raised to discuss, and it's a matter of gaining consensus around these issues where issues have been raised. And the other thing is just to, if members are content to include the correspondence from the Royal Courts of Justice as evidence to the committee report. And the letter from Mr. Justice Deeney does contain suggestions in regard to clause 13. So if we are content enough to forward the tabled response from the Chancery and Probate Committee to the Department for comment, we do that. Now, can we just go through these to see if there's an agreed course of action from the various clauses? Jim, do you want to take us through them there, please, just? And okay, members have this all in front of us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Page 22 onwards. Okay.
Okay, so clause 1, the committee had some issues in relation to that. The Department formed a committee that the legislation is in place and will, in relation to the remote meetings,
PwC and that had a number of issues in it, but it's a question whether the department's response addresses those to the committee's satisfaction.
I think maybe we covered this pretty well too. I think it was
Great.
satisfactory enough. Agreed then. Okay.
Then also in relation to that clause, there was the issue of time, adequate time being allowed, and I think that the Institute of Chartered Accountants suggested 2 weeks, and I think that the department has broadly agreed with that.
Great.
Okay, agreed.
That's content too.
Then
Clause 2, no issues were raised, so if the committee is content with that broadly.
agreed.
Clause 3,
Winding up. PwC seemed to be broadly said it was very practical and helpful, and the Insolvency Technical Committee in Ireland has agreement with this clause, so the practitioners seem to be very happy with it.
the only thing was in relation to the transitional arrangements. If you go over the page there,
Yes.
the department has come back and said to the committee in relation to, it's not considered appropriate to have new law applying to old cases.
Yeah.
So if members are content with that
Great.
Yes. Agreed.
response.
Okay. Clause 4 then.
Clause 4, there were no issues raised, so members are
Okay.
content.
Great.
Same for clause
Yeah.
5.
Same for clause 5. Agreed then.
Great.
Okay. Clause 6. Fast track voluntary arrangements.
Yeah, the committee. Yeah, this was about whether it was the intention of the department to do away with the fast track system, and the department said that there's no rush in this. Basically, there's a large number of outstanding issues that will be dealt with in a future insolvency bill, and it wasn't urgent at this stage to deal with this now. If members are
Content
content.
enough. Agreed.
Great.
Okay. 7.
Clause 7, no issues raised. Members are content with clause 8 as well, something similar,
Same with
and
clause
clause
8.
9
And clause
and
9.
10.
Great.
And 10. Okay.
Clause 11,
Now we're waiting the.
just awaiting from the examiner statutory rules statement, just waiting a response from the department on that. So if members are content to wait, clause
Great.
11.
Clause 11. Okay. Clause 12. Don't think this is going to be that earth shattering, this one.
Yeah, this would be early discharge of bankruptcy.
Only 2 people have ever been discharged under this provisions.
Great.
And largely speaking, the people who give oral evidence to the committee or written evidence were broadly content with this.
Do we need to change? Do we need to change it? I mean, just because only 2 are just. It's still a nice thing to have. I mean, a suitable thing to have in there, is it not? Or are they just saying it costs? It just seems
But
odd.
the people concerned had written to the department requesting early discharge.
The department has also said that it has been found that the benefits, the costs outweigh the benefits.
Yeah.
And found the cost of administering the scheme far outweigh any benefits to the bankrupts.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Okay, agreed.
There you
13. After acquired property of bankrupt, we're waiting a response from Chancellor. No, but that's the one that we've just dealt with there.
That response in today, however, if members want to await the response from the department on that, that can be considered again.
A few wee typos and stuff they had highlighted as well. So, okay, agreed. We wait the response from the department then. Okay. Clause 14.
Now,
Partial authorisation.
Clause 14 relates to partial authorisation. Now, there's 2 things here. Firstly, the committee's waiting on a response from the Insolvency Service on this, but the other thing then is in relation to Article 10. So, if members are content that Article 10 applies,
Well, I think on the Article 10 aspect, the departmental officials, I think it was in here we took the evidence from, they said that they had taken advice from, was the DSO, wasn't it? That it did apply, from my
That's correct,
recollection.
yes.
Aye. So, oh, there's, of course, there's written there in front of me. Legal advice from the DSO is that under the directive, if the legislation has been changed in one part of jurisdiction, every part of that jurisdiction should follow suit. So, I don't think we're in a position to disagree with that at this point. So, happy enough to go with that.
Great.
Okay. Thank you.
And
Clause 15.
sure, I'll keep the committee up to date with whatever comes back in relation to the rest of it, just to firm that one up.
Clause 15.
Nothing raised in relation to clause 15 or clause 16.
Agreed. Clause 17. Right of opinion. That's
Yeah, this was just a query that the committee had in relation to the Lord Chief Justice, so that if members are content with that response.
Agreed.
Agreed, yep.
Okay.
Right.
Clause 18. No issues raised. Clause 19. No issues raised. Agreed with them.
Yep.
Clause 20. No issues raised.
Great.
21. No issues raised. Agreed.
Great.
Schedule 1.
This, Chair, had to do with the transitional arrangements.
Yes.
So if members are content with clause 3 and the transitional arrangements, that applies to schedule 1. So
Okay.
okay to that.
And schedule 2. This is provision for statutory demands and tidying up of the writing.
How do you define right?
Legislation is vague. This is to make it more certain and concrete, supportive of the objectives. Agreed.
Great to support that, yeah.
Aye. Schedule 3. No issues raised. Agreed.
Great.
And then additional areas of concern for the committee. We're waiting for details of the amendment. You remember Mr. Alistair's issue that
Yeah.
Jim Alistair raised. So we're waiting for the details of the amendment from the department.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. Then the second thing was a backlog in the system. Remember to discuss this now. The PwC, I think, was said that they don't think that there is a backlog in provision. So, but however, it seems from this that maybe the backlog refers to those where there this official receiver conducts in this investigation identifies whether the insolvent person has any assets likely to be realised. If the assets won't be realised, then that's taken up by and administered by the department. So maybe the backlog is in those insolvency proceedings where there are no assets to be realised.
Right.
Well, okay.
Can we ask clarity of the fact?
We can ask for clarity around the backlog, but members are happy enough with pursuing that one issue.
You see there's an increase of staff there from
See that from 50 to 100. So
about 100% increase. It's not
it would
bad.
be.
Not bad.
Unfortunately, it's dealing with an issue which reflects what's happening outside the door, you know.
No, this is it. That's the thing.
So, right, then the next issue is the electronic signature. So, a set of rules is going to be introduced to define what can be used to formally sign off a document. So, agreed with that bit.
Right.
Original clause 14. This is down to the bank and securities issue. So, okay, agreed with that. Yes. Thank you. And speed of the bill through the House. So, members to note, I'm sure. Okay, agreed.
Agreed.
Great.
Okay, thanks very much, everybody. Through that bill. Okay, now next item is agenda item number 6, which is matters raising, and those are from pages 55 onwards. Now what we have there is at page 55 there's one item in the index which is marked for members to discuss, and that's the daily response to committee inquiries in relation to the National Policy Statement on Entrepreneurship in Ireland. In response to question 2, top of page 57, the department states that further detail would be needed to perform a like-for-like comparison with Northern Ireland in regard to enterprise programmes. So, are members content to commission Assembly Research to conduct a comparison between the North here and the Republic? Agreed?
Can I?
Yes, Danny.
In the document when going through it, I just thought there was a whole sort of massive detail. For example, when you're on innovation, it says executive innovation strategy, promotion, entrepreneurship and schools. I'd love to know more detail of what
Yes,
all
there was
these
a
are
couple of issues there,
and
Jim.
how effective they are.
I had them highlighted earlier there, that it might be helpful to ourselves, including tax breaks for entrepreneurs, and there was another particular programme, what's this was?
I'd love a chance.
TS programme or something. Who was it?
It was the high potential startups.
High potential startups programme. I think that might be helpful for us to get some detail on that as well. So, are members content? Sorry, Danny.
Just
was
there's a
there
few
anything
things
further
in
you
here in
wanted to add
detail.
there?
There's no chance of having a chance to question, answer, or would it be better if we put in our own written questions on the back of it?
Come back, and it'll come back.
Well, you could do that with Assembly Research. That's what we're thinking of doing, is getting the research to
Okay.
Yeah.
drill down a bit deeper on this stuff.
Okay.
So, and then we can decide
about
what direction we go. So, happy enough we commission the
Right.
research. Okay, thank you. Also tabled today is an invite from Professor David Waugh for the committee to visit the Council for Centre Research and Cell Biology at Queen's University Belfast. So, the committee office will be in touch with members about attendance at that. So, and
What would be
also,
attention, sorry, Chair, just
Yes.
on the, well, Thursday morning or something he's thinking of, or what are you thinking of?
Sorry, Chair's 12th of March.
Oh, 12th of March, we have a date for that.
Which is,
It's a Thursday morning.
Thursday morning, right, okay.
right, thank you.
Okay, and last week the committee agreed to issue a survey to Northern Ireland businesses. The survey will issue today or tomorrow, and the link will be forwarded to members so that members can distribute that around people that, or stakeholders that they may well have themselves within their constituencies. And myself and Phil here plan to meet with Alistair Hamilton from Invest NI to discuss how the committee can capture information from businesses without a presence in Northern Ireland. So, if members are content to issue a survey for businesses without presence in Northern Ireland, and Jim has done some good work on that and he can forward you along the details by email as well. Okay, agreed?
Agreed.
And if members are content also to arrange oral evidence sessions in the first instance from the Northern Ireland Chamber of Commerce, Manufacturing NI, the IOD, the Federation for Small Business, ICTU and the Nevin Institute. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, and Jim, in terms of the time frame for that then, we'll be rolling that out. That'll be the first of those will be next week, is it?
No, Chair, the first of those,
Sorry.
hoping to have the 17th of February.
All right.
Although the
okay.
week before that, 10th of February, a specialist advisor is coming in and
All right, right. Good.
we'll have information on that. Also, Chair, just for information further on the Ulster University Economic Policy Unit, I think it's called now, formerly NICEP, is coming in and I'm seeking agreement from them. They're coming in early March, seeking agreement from them to also cover the issues for the inquiry at that as well. So that will be 2 briefings.
Good.
But an updated forward programme will be brought to the committee next week.
Mm-hmm. Good, great. Thank you. I know I've had a number of people already commented to me about it. They're really looking forward to it and engaging with it. So, okay, thank you. Now, next item is agenda item number 7, and that's the written briefing from the Consumer Council Consumer Outlook Index, January 2015. And members have it in front of us here about the range of issues that we have to deal with. Might be helpful at some stage if members want to meet to pursue this, and if there's any more detailed studies being done on this, to pursue it with the Consumer Council. We could have another briefing from them at some stage then.
Yeah, agreed, yeah.
Now, agenda item number 8, a written briefing from the Consumer Council. That's around banking issues and financial inclusion. And today we have a briefing from the Consumer Council. That's at page 78 in the facts. Now, just on this, it's particularly opportune that we have this. And I know one of the authors maybe of some of the studies just joined us there, Rachel, at the back. So the clerk has been in contact with the clerk to the Committee of Finance and Personnel. The CFP, that committee, is considering the scope for hosting a stakeholder event on the issues identified during a briefing it had from the Consumer Council on banking issues last week. So this would include the potential measures to minimise the impact of branch closures and to tackle financial inclusion. The Committee for Finance and Personnel understands that any initiative in this regard would likely to be on a collaborative basis with our own committee here. And given us a previous agreement to this effect, it is mindful that the powers over banking and financial institutions aren't obviously devolved. The Committee for Finance and Personnel also agreed that a final decision the way forward would be taken in light of both the work being undertaken by the Consumer Council and the forthcoming report from the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee on its inquiry into the banking structure here in the North. So apparently that Westminster Committee's report is due either late on in February or in early March, and is likely to make some wide-ranging recommendations, including on various of the issues that were discussed between the Finance and Personnel Committee and the Consumer Council. Indeed, we give evidence in here to that committee. I know I represent the committee in that regard. So we are awaiting the publication of the Westminster Committee report and receipt of the further research by the Consumer Council. So the staff of both committees, if we're agreeable with this course of action, will examine the options for potential stakeholder event for further consideration by the committee. But it wouldn't be proper or right, or to be ill-informed too, if we did that before the publication of the Westminster report, and indeed any additional research work being conducted by the Consumer Council. So if members are happy enough to just suck it and see until such times as that those reports and additional research become available, and then consider organising the stakeholder event. Happy enough with that approach, aye?
Sure, yeah, I think.
Yep. Yes, Gordon.
Just on bank closures and community banking, you know, they're saying that within this report by the end of February this year, 77 branches, 31% of the big four banks will have closed throughout Northern Ireland. That's significant. And the point I've made before is about the lack of consultation.
Yes.
You know, I think there should be some obligation for the banks to come,
yes,
you know, to have consultation with the local communities before they decide to leave town, and at least leave some legacy there, and also have made some arrangements for customers who cannot get access to, obviously, to their bank if they move some distance away. So I think we should try and push for an obligation for the banks to consult with local communities about such changes, and obviously where there are closures.
Hopefully we could raise that as part of that stakeholder event, because all of us have been in situations where thump bang you get a phone call, if you're lucky, from the corporate services division of the bank to say, hey, by the way, there's a press release away out there, you know. And it's not really the way to do things.
I forget a lot of them are public servants now, and public are paying their wages, running the businesses.
That's right.
You know, so I think it's important that they treat the public fairly, and basically long-term customers.
Okay, that'll be an important issue for the stakeholder event. So that's grand. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Chair.
Next item is agenda item number 9, the consultation on the proposals for the new COMAH regulations. So we have those included in your papers from pages 91 onwards. So if members are content to receive, as we normally do in these cases, a summary of the responses following the consultation. Read. Yep, thank you. Next item is agenda item number 8, which is the EU Matters newsletter. That's from page 248 onwards. And I have to say, having gone through this last night, I appreciate this. It is very, very helpful indeed. And also, Jim, do we know, or maybe we could establish from Shauna, is the Executive Office in Brussels feeding into this, you know, by way of providing information?
I'll check that with Shauna. But
I would hope so,
they
because this is good. And just there's a couple of items there. There was the European Investment Plan, and special task force been set up. This is at page 248. A new 15 billion investment scheme. Cross-border projects on research, transport, energy, including projects in Northern Ireland. It would be helpful if we could get from the department details of that. Okay? Just how or if they're taking advantage of that. And there's also new funding for innovation, a fast-track to innovation pilot initiative to promote innovation to be implemented in 2015-16 as a new innovation under Horizon 2020. Again, it would be helpful if we heard from the department, and particularly Invest NI, as to what or if they're doing anything under that. Agreed then? Thank you.
Agreed.
So, correspondence, there are 3 items of correspondence included in the papers. The index is at page 254. And the papers are from page 255 to 273. So, if members are content with the suggested course of action.
Can I just ask, Gordon had asked last week for the utility regulator to be up before us. Do we have a date for that yet?
Have we got a date, Jim, yet?
No, we don't, Chair. Obviously, what happens is that the letter goes out to the utility regulator, so we'll have to wait for a reply from them.
Right,
Okay. That's us. Agenda item number 12 is any other business, unless anybody has any other business. That concludes our meeting for today, so thank you for covered a lot of ground there today. Date, time and place of next review.
3rd of February.
Oh yes, indeed. The date of the next committee meeting will be Tuesday 3rd of February in room 29 at 10 o'clock. Okay, thank you. All right.